I was at home making dinner on a regular night after work. It was around 7 p.m., or maybe even later, and I'd gotten home from work only an hour before. I wasn't making anything fancy, just a small chicken breast and some frozen corn. I had just finished with the chicken, began draining the water from the corn, when a light scraping sound came through the house. It was short and quick and not very loud, but the strangeness of the sound, that made me flinch a little. I continued doing what I was doing, thinking it was just some weird sound that the house was making that I just never heard before. But then again, that same scraping sound vibrated through the walls. It was such an unusual sound, I had no idea what to think of it. I quickly finished plating my food, then went. I turned and looked as it seemingly came from the front of the house. I walked further down the driveway by the sidewalk and looked back, and that's when I saw a small light coming from one of the windows in a dark room of my home. After a couple seconds, I realized it was the attic window and that the light was moving, almost like someone was shining a flashlight around. I was horrified. Someone was in my attic, doing who knows what, and for how long. I stayed out front, calling the police as I stared at the window, watching the light move around slowly. But as I was talking on the phone, the light got dimmer before shining directly at me. They held it there for a couple seconds, then shut it off. And even from outside, I was able to hear a few loud thuds. I immediately ran over to my neighbor's yard, trying to explain to the operator what was going on, while looking over at my house in terror. From where I was, it looked silent and calm, but that only made it more scary, knowing that something awful was likely going on inside. After a few minutes, though, nothing else was seen, and the cops finally made it. They searched the house first, then brought me inside to talk. They found multiple shoe prints in the attic, and they suspected it was likely a group of teenagers messing around with me, and likely not trying to cause any harm. There were no signs of anyone living there or anything, which was a relief. I had time to grieve at home without having to go to school or anything. After a few days of the family grieving together, at the loss of our first family dog, things went back to normal. My parents went back to work, and I stayed home on summer break. However, I immediately felt a difference. This was the first time I'd ever really been completely home alone in my entire life, without Buddy to always be by my side. I was constantly paranoid and uneasy about every small sound coming from the house. Not to mention, we'd only lived in the place for a few months, so I didn't even really know the area or feel fully safe yet. Anyway, just a week after losing Buddy, it was another regular day. My parents left for work, and I stayed home. The house was only one story, so the layout was basically just a line. When you walk in the front door, there's the kitchen and living room, which then leads to a long hallway with 2 rooms on the side, and my parents' bedroom at the end. For the past week of being alone, I'd always walk down the hallway and close all of the bedroom doors. For some reason, I didn't like seeing the doors open in the hallway, as it just gave me a weird feeling. So, this day was no different. I went along the hallway, closing each door, until I got to my parents' room. I pulled the door through the doorway and began walking back, but immediately realized that I didn't hear the click sound of the door being fully shut. So I turned back around and pulled the door shut more firmly this time, hearing the click sound of the door locking in place. I went back to my room where I had my computer and closed the door. I put on my headphones and watched YouTube for almost 2 hours straight, since there wasn't much else to do. By this point, though, it was about 9 a.m., and I was ready for some breakfast. I laid my headphones on the desk and opened my room door, stepping into the hallway. As I stepped out and turned towards the living room, I couldn't help but notice something was off in the corner of my eye. I turned my head to look back down the hallway and instantly froze. The door at the end of the hallway was open. Better, but still terrified, I quickly and carefully double-checked the living room and dining room, making sure the intruder wasn't hiding anywhere, then stood at the end of the hallway. I walked down to the spare bedroom, trying to open the door quietly, but it was old and creaky. Everything seemed to be exactly how it was left. Nothing moved at all. I backed out and closed the door. I saved my parents' bedroom for last, as it was the room with the open door, and I was terrified. It didn't help that this house was in the middle of a forest, knowing that no help was anywhere nearby. I stood at the doorway for another minute, only able to see half of my parents' bed while clutching the knife and listening. It was dead silent. Fear continued to rise inside me as I called out shakily, but there was no response. I tried to... It took me straight to the Instagram Direct app, which I had never actually used before. I was confused, seeing a text from a guy named Jason, simply saying, "Hello." His name looked familiar, but was definitely not one of my close friends. I clicked on his profile and saw that we had one mutual friend, and that we'd been friends on Instagram for 4 months. Sparked my memory from when I accepted his invite. Honestly, I just accept anyone's invite as long as they have mutual friends with me. I don't share anything too private online, so it never really mattered to me. I went back to the message and just said hi to be polite, though also beginning to recognize how late it was and how odd it was to randomly text someone at this time. Immediately after I sent it, the 3 dots appeared as the person was typing, followed by a new message reading it. I immediately gasped and dropped my phone on the table while looking over at the window. The text read, "I love that movie too. We should watch it together." I didn't see anything outside the window, though. It was completely black outside. I was shaking.
He was in there, and they immediately took their guns out and rushed in. The intruder's footsteps ran down the steps as the officers opened the door and carefully followed after. They caught the man after a quick struggle to keep this short. The man had broken in through the window well in the basement, so that's what the noise was. As for who he actually was Jason from Instagram. I assumed he was using a fake account or something, but no, that was actually him. He didn't give any reason for breaking in aside from apparently just wanting to talk to me. It was very odd and creepy. I'd never had anything like that happen before, as I kind of just thought these were things that only happened in movies. Later that week, I went through my friends list and removed anyone I didn't know personally. It's sad that I have to do that, but I guess this is the world we live in now.